Welcome back, everyone, for another episode of the Changing Hearts and Minds series. I am Ellza Malok. I run Blue Monarch Group, a human behavior consulting firm.
And I am Brad Newberger. I am co-founder of Ambiance IQ, one of the nation's leaders in sensory branding. Welcome. I'm excited to talk with you today, Ellza.
Yeah, me too. So for those of you that are new, we have kind of three versions of this, and Brad is the kind of leader on the experience side of this edition for the Changing Hearts and Minds series. And Brad, I know we've been wanting to talk about this topic a lot, and it is around the power of scent. So I'll let you get the audience going on what scent is and kind of level set the game for everyone.
I appreciate that. And scent it's a lot of fun. When I go up to somebody and I tell them what I do and we talk about, scent marketing, which is always a fun place. It's so funny because almost, I'd say with about 90 to 95% of the time, somebody tells me back a story of them going to a 5-star hotel or a spa and saying, oh my gosh, I was just at this beach resort and I bought a candle. And yeah, so you do that, right? You make that thing smell good when you walk into a lobby or something of that sort. And what I love and why I smile when everybody just goes ahead and tells me why my product is so great because your power of smell is so strong, it sells the point. Your sense of smell is the most powerful of your 5 senses that actually exist. And that is the power of what scent can do for workplaces, what scent can do for businesses, because people actually remember it. So let's play a little guessing game here, which is kind of fun. So this is just very generic to start. But if I were to give you a number between 1 and, I don't know, 100,000, what do you think the average number of odors that a single person can detect from their nose is? Would you have any clue?
Um, I mean, I think I do because we may have talked about it, but it's like in the 10,000 range or something.
Right around 10,000, which is insane. Because I think people would think
Couple
1,000,
hundred.
maybe 5,000, 100, but each person can actually detect over 10,000 different odors, unique odors, which is
Yeah.
really kind of fun. And the other one that really gets me is this one's good. So what percentage or how many times more likely do you think that you're likely to remember something that you smell versus something that you see?
Oh, I don't
Five
remember this one.
times, 10 times, 50 times. What do you think that number would be?
25, 30,
Yeah,
give or
that's what most
take.
people say. 100. 100 times more likely to remember what you smell versus what you see. And then the craziest part is after 1 year, you have a 65% chance of accurately recalling that same smell versus like a visual, it drops by over 50% after only 3 months. So, which explains why if you went on vacation and you went to this nice resort and you actually remember that smell, the fact that you can remember what that smell is, and if you went back there, it would bring back all these memories associated with that. It's right in line with that because your sense of smell is truly that powerful. Isn't that kind of cool?
It is, and it's so interesting because I think about it from a CMO perspective of you're trying to create these memorable engagements with people, right?
Yep.
And you spend so much money on the visuals and you spend so much money on the language and content, which I think are all still very, very important. And then for you to not be able to necessarily know that this tool exists around the fact that you can extend it a year later and still have that
Still
amount
remember
of
it.
retention, that's huge from
It's
a
huge.
brand equity standpoint.
Because they'll actually associate your brand or your workplace with that particular fragrance. That's the most unique part. It's hard to do that with artwork. It's hard to do that with lighting. It's hard to do that with paint color, right? There's a lot of these things like, do people notice the color of the walls? They do, but could they recall? Could you recall what color the wall is in the grocery store that you were at 6 months ago if you were traveling? Maybe, maybe not. But if it smelled good, you remember it. But even better, if it smelled bad, guess what?
Mm,
You
you'll
also
definitely
remember
remember
it.
it. Yeah.
And so you gotta, the beauty is it works both for you and against you, because if something does smell bad, and you get this at home, right? You're cooking something and the oil burns, and then all of a sudden you walk in your house next day and you get that
Mm,
burnt smell, right? You ever had that happen when you're cooking? I don't know if you cook. I'm a
I
cook. My
do.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah, my wife is not a cook. I'm the cook in the family, but I get it and I know it, and it really impacts that when I first walk in the door. So that's some of the top level power of what really your sense of smell can do.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I recall a market research program we did around perception and the way that it was impacting. And this was years ago, but we talked about it's like you need to redo your bathrooms and get something better in place because the smell of the bathrooms will prevent somebody from going into the entire restaurant from it. And it could be, the way it's located or where it's positioned or what have you. But that puts like a little note in people's minds like, I don't want to be here because I don't like how close it is to the rest of the eating area. I don't like there's just a lot of subliminal and organizational components that you have to take into consideration when you talk about smell because smell travels. Um, that's a big component of it, and you may not even be the person creating that spell. It may even be your tenant, like your retailer next door that's causing that issue.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of especially the indoor stores. We've seen that, right, where you have a really nice smelling like a Cinnabon or something like that, and then you have Pink or some other
Right
retailer
next
next
door.
door, and they're like, "Why does this location do way better than all the others?"
So you got
It's
the traffic going in.
because you got the traffic boost from your neighbor. Could happen the other way around though, especially if you have like a Bath and Body Works next to some kind of grill place.
Right. You don't want those smells competing against each other. And you want to watch how it impacts cleanliness, because you talk about the point of a bathroom. Imagine this. Imagine if you're going and you pull over at a kind of sketchy truck stop, and it's one of the ones you have to walk in, you have to walk around the
Oh
back to the
no.
key. Okay. So you have this preconceived notion of what that bathroom's going to look like, right? You open it up, you expect that there going to be toilet paper everywhere and just have this foul odor. What if you opened it up and it had this super pleasing aroma to it, like you actually felt like you were at a five-star hotel? What would your impression be of that convenience store after you left that restroom?
It's interesting because cleanliness and safety, when we think about like the language models, the way that we use it, those are very symbiotic, where something is clean, therefore something is safe. And we saw that, right? During COVID,
COVID.
everybody was
Yeah.
was was very frightening to say, does this place smell clean? Am
Oh,
I am
clean.
I
Yep.
am I in a safe environment? So those are kind of components. So maybe we can go into, because I know we've talked a lot about consumer and
Yeah.
and buyer environments. Let's talk a little bit more about workplace environments because I know you have a ton of research on that side on how it impacts performance and how it could impact even the perception of coming into the office. And I'm actually actively working on a return to the office program right now, so it's kind of timely.
Our RTO is huge, and the cool part with this is it crosses a couple different areas, because you have both the actual brands that are in the office, but you also have the real estate developers that are trying to fill the spaces inside the buildings. And you have both of these groups that are looking at fragrance and aroma in general as a way to entice people back to work, right? And they are really on two different channels, because they're going for two different audiences, I would say, and who they're trying to impress with the aroma impressions they're getting. So
Mm.
if you think about it from a real estate developer's purpose, one of the single biggest uses of fragrance that you can do is first impression. So you walk into a scented versus a non-scented environment, your perception of what that establishment is automatically uplifted. It shows they care. You kind of look a little bit, oh, okay, this smells really good, right? So a lot of
Mhm.
real estate developers are looking to put the fragrance in the lobby areas. So when you have a prospective tenant, when your building tenants are hosting clients, right? It's all about that first impression going in. So that's a really popular use to help drive engagement, and really just a soft added benefit of the building itself health to really show the clients and create that first impression. If you've got law firms, CPA firms, tax attorneys, really any sort of these professional service brands that are in there, it really does uplift you to a different level. And when you're charging $750,000 an hour for some of these law firms, you need to know that you're walking into an establishment that kind of puts that level of detail into every single thing that they do, right?
Right.
So that's a big one. And then in the offices themselves, this is kind of fun. So you can use the fragrance in I'd say two ways. There's a lot of different ways you can do it, but two main ways. So one is the relaxation rooms. And I'm sure you're dealing with this in RTO. Have you talked a lot about some of these like wellness benefits or some of these areas that brands are trying to create to give employees spaces to relax or take a brain break while during their workday?
Right. Yeah, we're having those conversation, and it's kind of tied to biophilic, which I know we want to talk about in a different episode, but it is tied to that. Like, in order to improve brain power, in order to improve productivity in the office, those breaks need to occur um probably around 2 to 3 times in an 8-hour shift. That's kind of the general analysis that we've kind of done. It's kind of like a power nap. It's a power relaxation environment where you take your 20 minutes and then you're back fully reinvigorated into it. And that's a big component of this, is how do we mimic and use some of these psychological environments to say, come into the office, and then if you do need your break, you have a space to go to, and you have one that invigorates all of your senses for it. So let's talk a little bit about specifics though. So if a workplace is looking to drive those types of relaxation ecosystems, what do they start with?
Couple areas. You could start just basically as simple as a small little wellness room. You put a little massage chair or some nice relaxing environment. You can put on some pleasing music, and then you can go for the spa feel. Okay, right? There's a couple ways you can go, but in that case, you're putting in some more of these relaxing scents, some of the lavenders, some scents that are known to be just provoking relaxation. I don't want to necessarily put everybody to sleep. That's not necessarily the goal. But when you
Mhm.
can walk in there, you just can kind of feel the tension just go down a little bit. Because when you walk into a spa, same environment, right? You get that. They all have a kind of similar feel to the note. Sometimes it's a little bit of lemongrass. Sometimes it's a lot of lavender. Sometimes
Mhm.
it's just very relaxing feels with the individual fragrances that are being chosen on that realm. So that's one area where I think is pretty strong. The other way you can go is all around productivity, interestingly
Mhm.
enough. And you can put in, there's actually a whole plethora of scientific research that's been done on trying to show fragrances that can induce brain power, getting your brain more engaged, getting you more focused on the work that you're actually doing. You know, similar to music, which again we'll delve into on another topic. And when you pair these together, that's really it's like the superfood, the superpower of sensory, right?
Mhm.
But do you know what the I won't recommend this for all environments, but do you know what the research says is the fragrance that can produce this the most, that kind of energy effect inside?
Yeah, I remember we had talked about it being kind of the citrusy scents, and how they alert specific neurons in the brain to kind of stay up front from it. But you hit on something really important right before the question.
Okay.
You don't recommend it in every instance,
Yeah.
right? It's the balance, because somebody
Yeah.
could potentially take this information and say, "Oh, I'll just spread it all across my offices." And that's not what we want you to do. So, like, this is a PSA. This is not what we want you to do. What we recommend is having that balanced approach, because you could go too far down the path. Because scent also, because it manipulates and it activates parts of the hippocampus and amygdala, which is emotion and memory.
Yep.
You could go too far down the path and create an anxiety driven environment.
You could, and if you're in a row of cubes or open flex workspace, these are really designed more for the break room, the entryway, the relaxation rooms, places where you're not doing your complete and total focused environments.
Right.
But in those areas, putting the citrus in, the menthol mint is actually another one that's super super powerful in that effect. It sounds odd, but it really does wake up. And again, you get it right. You take a like Vicks vapor rub when you're sick. You ever put that on your chest, right? And you
Yeah.
get the menthol that comes up. That's there for a reason, right? That's the science that's really showing you how that process works. But you're correct. If you do this the wrong way, you can turn people off, or you can just create too how do I say this correctly? Too much of a sensory experience. There is too much of a good thing, right? So you got to
Right. It
balance
could be
it.
a little bit of overload
Yeah.
on the cognitive side. And I think that part of that is also going to say, well, let's look at the space holistically, right? So we have parts of the working environment that talk about relaxation and maybe other parts that are meeting rooms, think tanks where you want that. And then there's like that sense of cleanliness that you kind of have throughout with it and really designing your space in a way that talks about it. And I think that unfortunately we have a lot of organizations that have that open office
It's
lower
popular.
environment,
Yep.
which hits on the sound side that we want to talk about. But if you have that in an open space, you could actually hurt your team members because they may run to those more relaxation spaces more often because it's too much cognitive overload. So now you've kind of swung the pendulum too far on the other side of what you're trying to accomplish. And in most cases, we don't even recommend you have those big open cube environments because they're not conducive to thoughtful working. Breaking those spaces up is much more important, and then you could potentially use some of those. All right, is this kind of a free seating, people get together and work together environment? You could introduce that because now you're limiting your square footage on where that's going to occur. So creating those moments
Yep.
and then having sense support those moments is really key from a macro level.
Macro standpoint. Like, it's like everything you do. You can't. We can talk about the research on the top level, right? But at the
Mhm.
end of the day, you got to do what's best for your brand, your workplace, your environment, and that's what experts, like us, like what my company does, and other ones out there like us, the right ones are going to talk. We're going to understand what is your end goal. I'm a big fan of back solving, right? I'm not trying to fit a square peg in a round hole. I want to know what your end goal actually is, and then we're going to help you through that sensory journey, right? Understand how to create that experience, knowing what you're looking for in the end, instead of working front ways and then just trying to say, well, this is what we do. Let's just put it here, 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 and here, and here, right? That's the wrong approach to the problem, because you're just spraying, right? Spray and pray, hoping that something will stick and that you're actually getting the effect. So you always want to be cognizant, first impressions, meeting rooms, the gyms, the bathrooms. Those are really the target areas where you can go. But there's, like I said, there's just some really cool science around the positive benefits that you can get from this really like just pleasantly smelling environment. You can just kind of smile when you walk in the door every day and kind of be
Mhm.
more proud of your workplace and what you do. And then guess what? If you are hybriding, so they're in the office 3 days a week and at home too, the cool part is you can take it off site. You can make candles and give that as giveaways to your employees, and they can
Right. For
recreate this in
retention.
their workplace at home, right? But then there's a connection to what they have at home in that workplace and what they have in the office to bridge those gaps together, right?
And think about how many people are applying right now to remote only, and there's probably more initiatives to bring people back into the office, and therefore their hiring is in person only, or
Yeah.
some type of remote local experience. Well, if they walk into your lobby, your personal, not necessarily the building lobby, but they walk into your lobby and they have a particular sense of, oh wow, this place feels welcoming.
Yep.
Like creating that and tying it to the brand identity is part of the secret sauce. The reverse engineering is something we do too, saying like, okay, how do you want talent and potentially customers to walk into your offices? And what do you want them to feel when they walk in? Because it has to tie back to your overall business strategy around we do X, Y, and Z, and we make people feel this way.
100%. And you can tie this back to the consumer brands as well, because of
Hmm.
course, going back to the very first story I told, when people told me about that scent at the hotel they went to, they usually bought a candle in the gift shop, right? So the beauty with fragrance on the brand side is not only is it a powerful driver of the in-store experience, but with the right strategy, you can make it a revenue center, not just a cost center, and take it off brand and do special giveaways for your most active people. A couple years ago, I don't know if you remember this, KFC launched the viral fried chicken candle. Do you remember? Did you ever hear about that one?
I do remember that. Yeah.
Who wants their house to smell like fried chicken? Nobody, but it was just fun, right?
Yeah.
It's a fun giveaway. And they got a lot of impressions. They got a lot of buzz. It was like 500 candles. Everything was very limited quantity in terms of what we do. But for the CMOs out there of those kind of brands, these are the fun things that you can think about with fragrance, because fragrance is so tangible, right? It can impact so many aspects of where you go. So being able to connect it with not only what you have in store, but taking a piece of that brand or your workplace back home with you, that's powerful, right? That's something that not a lot of brands are doing really to the extent that they could to really maximize that benefits and grow market share and revenue, right? That's
Yeah.
the fun part about it.
Well, it's interesting because that is a very digital first experience that has a very small um in person like physical environment, right? Because we just said the
Yep.
quantities were really low. The whole purpose was to make this experience be available in the virtual setting, and then those that did get the candle, they have kind of a perpetual environment.
Yeah.
But I bet you every time that person, like, if they've ever lit that candle, which I doubt, but every time they see it, they would just be like, "Oh yeah, I remember that. That was
Right.
funny."
It was
Or
fun.
or someone had gifted to them because it could be a great white elephant gift or something like that. Like, you
Right.
think about those unique ways that you can take it, where it's not just the standard, here's an advertising campaign, here's what we're gonna do. You want to integrate all of these programs within each other, because I always kind of talk about the compounding effect.
Yeah.
When you lace scent with when you lace scent with music,
Hopefully
and
nothing too crazy there what you're
yeah,
lacing with, but yes, I
yeah,
get where you're going with it.
when you lace that with music, now you actually have that compounding effect. When you do both of those things with any type of digital experience, now you're actually maximizing it, because someone may not remember what your particular, let's say you were selling some kind of outdoor sporting good for winter, and you have a candle for that campfire scent. Everybody knows what a campfire scent is.
Yeah.
It's a universal thing, stateside at least. So you could even use the memory of a scent to drag it into the digital experience and move
100%.
it through.
Okay, so that's a good segue. Let's do a couple. I'm a neuroscience guy. We're all about the science here. So let's just spend a quick second talking about the science behind what happens when you smell, and then we can touch on the memory and scent. I want to do this first to understand how it processes in the brain, but we keep talking about memory. It is so linked. It's not even funny together. So do you mind if we spend just a few seconds talking about this? I think it's a really good segue.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. So what happens when you smell? Okay. So what neurochemically, what happens in the brain is when you take that first, get that nice deep breath in. So these tiny odor molecules basically go right into your nose, and they go into these specialized cavities within your nose. And these receptors, think of them almost like tiny padlocks. Okay. And so that each scent molecule is unique and it fits perfectly with one of these molecules. And then
Mhm.
once the receptor remembers what that fragrance is, right, it's being able to attach to it, it basically opens it up and it sort of sends the signal right from your nasal cavity right up to your brain. Okay. And then, like you kind of hit at before, it really hits two different systems in your brain. It goes for the limbic system, which is the emotional side of your brain, and it hits the hippocampus, which is the memory side of your brain. And this is why the smells can instantly trigger these powerful emotions and vivid memories, because it's actually going directly to the place in your brain that stores memories. It's all logical when you really think about it.
Right.
So when it reaches let's start in the limbic side. When it hits the limbic side, it's going to release these neurotransmitters in the brain, and it's going to typically, If it's a good smell, it's going to lead to the release of these feel-good chemicals like the dopamine and the serotonin. That's why you're getting to that 7-Eleven with the clean bathroom and all of a sudden it smells really good. You actually get the pleasure and the relaxation genes, not the fight or flight response. This is, oh my gosh, I've got to get out of here, right?
Right.
So you pull it in there. The hippocampus, when it's impacting the memory, what it's really trying to do, and this is all happening in nanoseconds, right? You're not realizing, these are all subconscious. You're not realizing that your brain is processing these activities. This is all being done in the subconscious below what your processing power is there. And in that particular atmosphere, what's happening is that it's looking for a memory that it has inside the brain and trying to tie it to what you're smelling. So the pros effect. This is from a study back in 2010. This is really one of the most kind of institutional ones that was done on this topic. And it says if you have a familiar scent and you smell it, you can be instantly transported to that specific place in time, triggering the emotions that were associated with that memory. So if you walked into your mom's house and she was baking chocolate chip cookies, and every year for your birthday, she always baked these cookies. The moment you walk back in the house and get even the slightest whiff of that smell, you're transported back to all those memories of that. Does that make sense? Have you had an
Yeah.
experience where you've kind of been triggered?
I'll use my very like personal experience. So I'm originally from Kosovo, and it's actually like a whole generational component of immigrants that have moved outside of Kosovo since the 90s. And I was a kid, but every morning, every once in a while, when there's fog in the air here in the States, and I wake up and I go outside, I get this whiff, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm transported back home.
No.
And it's funny because I said that the other day to a cousin of mine who is over a decade younger than me, and she has the same exact core ecosystem. She's like, "Oh my God, it smells like Kosovo." Because for whatever reason, our brain has associated those early mornings with that
That's
foggy scent to it. And I've asked a bunch of people in our community, and we all have a very similar, it's like a generational thing. We all have a very similar component of a core memory that gets unlocked every time we go outside and it's fresh in the morning and there's fog outside.
it's what you grew up with, and that I've heard that story from a lot of people who have moved from like either one country to another or something like that. When they get a whiff of something that reminds them from home, they say it's really striking how quickly they can be transported back to that environment and just get hopefully those positive associations, but it can turn negative too. There's a lot of soldiers who there are certain smells from war that will trigger them, that when they smell this particular fragrance, it puts them back into the battlefield and reminds them of that area.
Mhm.
So like I said, scent can be very triggering. What we try to do is hopefully for the positive, but know that the negative smells as well can have just as strong of a reaction inside the brain, because your brain of course can't delineate between, like, well, it does a happy memory and a sad memory, but it's not like you can really control which one you're
Which one you
accessing via the
pull?
smell
Yeah,
that's coming through at that moment in time. So that's why
yeah.
you do have to be careful with scenting, because like I said, you put fishy your seafood restaurant, you're like, well, let's make it smell like fresh seafood. Well, that's going to be a better idea on paper than in reality, because a lot of people don't find the smell
Don't
of
like
fresh
the scent of
seafood to be terribly pleasing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I get that. I mean, mine's was very, very nice. Like transported me to my grandmother's farm, which is where I
Right.
spent most of my summers. So that was
What you
like
want.
perfect. But it's interesting to know that there's a dial that you have to kind of manage.
Yep.
And it's both in strength, it's both in the types of scents that you bring. There's also a cultural component to it. So
Yes.
you don't want necessarily certain scents to be in certain stores, especially if you're traveling internationally, because the campfire scent is not a universal one. In
Correct.
fact, in other countries, as you mentioned, it actually pulls in very negative
Yep.
memories from that. So you have to balance this and almost have a localized environment to say, what are you doing? And I'll use Garrett's popcorn because that's here local in Chicago.
Of course.
They have a particular flavor that they use in their stores, and you know it's Garrett's. That's like
For
their
those who are not from Chicago, just what is Chicago style popcorn? Because not everybody might know what Chicago style popcorn is.
oh, it's a hodgepodge. We're like because we're such a multicultural, like my favorite is when you mix caramel and cheese
That's the
together.
base. Yeah.
It's the combo. So it's
Yep.
that hodgepodgey like kind of mix everything together, very melting pot ecosystem, which fits our local environment a lot. But Garrett's popcorn, when you walk into it, you can kind of smell that. It's a nice blend too. That's the thing where we talk about the dialing is the two scents don't overpower each other and they don't also clash. So they've got there's a balance there.
But if I blindfolded you and you were not in Chicago, you were in LA and there was a Garrett's there and I walked you into that store, do you think with a high degree of certainty that you would know that that was a Garrett's just purely based on the smell?
I might. I might.
Yeah.
I go often enough
Yeah.
to it, and it's associated for me personally. It's associated every time I go to the Art Institute, I stop at Garrett's and then I go home. So it's like associated with the time I spent watching the Monet pieces and then come back.
This is for a different time. Chicago likes to do things their own way. My family's from Chicago. I grew up going there at least a couple times a year, but can't have regular pizza. Have to have deep dish pizza. Can't have a regular hot dog. Gotta have a Chicago style hot dog. So
We've got
Chicago
our
really
own
likes to do
brand.
your own
Yeah.
thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah. But that's kind of the what I'm talking about as far as the localization. Like what
Right.
you would do at a Garrett's maybe would be different than the one that you want in Los Angeles, or maybe the same because you may have transplants that want to say, "Oh wow, this reminds me of home." It's one of the reasons why Portillo's does so well in like outside of the state is because they have a lot of transplants that talk about it, and then there's also great food. So then you have that combination, and they've got a very specific aesthetic that they try to aim for.
Absolutely. You know, it's not
So
again. We're going on a way tangent here, but then we'll save Cincinnati chili for a whole other topic too. I can think of nothing more divisive than chili on spaghetti and the cinnamon flavor of that. You love it or you hate it. That's how I kind of feel. There's really no middle. Have you ever had it? You ever been to Cincinnati?
I haven't.
See, there you go.
Yeah.
And then most people would never have known about it. But you know, they're like super regionalized food. That again, my father-in-law is from Cincinnati. They make it at home. And when I walk into their house and they're doing Cincinnati chili that night, oh, you know, it has that aroma that you're going for. And you can kind of really get in there with that.
Yeah. Um, so I hope this gave the audience a really good overview. We've talked quite in tandem. Let's kind of close it out with
Yeah.
a couple of key pieces that we want to uh, reiterate. The first one obviously is making sure you kind of have a holistic strategy and you get the dials well. What else do we think that we should communicate to the community to say, hey, keep an eye out for these couple of things as you're investigating this potential journey of scent in your either workplace or retail environment?
You know, I think with workplace, I think you're looking for things that can help separate your brand, your impression from other ones around you. And this is really one of those soft things that many people are not looking at that can really help make a difference in that. So look at it for your entryway to your lobby. Look at it for your conference rooms. Looking at it for your wellness rooms. These are very small things that can make a big impact in terms of how people perceive the office and can make it a more pleasurable environment to be in when you have some of these benefits that they can't get while they're working from home. And that
Mhm.
same thing goes for the real estate developers who are trying to fill the spaces. It's almost a no-brainer if you've got a high-end building and you're really trying to target a particular kind of brand for their corporate office or the professional services with law firms and CPA firms and anybody like that. It's so simple to add the scent into your lobby. If they're looking at gyms, yeah, I'm sure we'll do a whole other podcast on the RTO stuff, but they're looking at other building amenities that can get people in from gym centers and things like that. These are no-brainers to make it feel like you're at an Equinox, not at like a, Anytime Fitness or something like that, right? Just
Mhm.
help you upgauge you up one level. And for brands, not to discount it, because like I said, why would you spend so much time on lighting and color schemes and paint color and types of shelves to buy when you can have something that impacts 100 times more powerful than what they see when they go in a place? It's just low
Right.
hanging fruit for them to go for almost a minuscule cost what they're getting, let alone a retail center there. So I think
Yeah.
people just need to know more about it and to recognize the power of scent. And if you think about it in your own light, you think about a time when you went to a hotel and they had the fragrance and you're like, oh my gosh, that's how powerful. That's how people can remember and associate your brand. And if you think about it that way, there are very few things that you can get that same level of recall from. in transporting the in-store experience out and just keeping top of mind in people. Like if they somehow got a whiff of that fragrance once again, they associate that with your brand. That's what it is. That's what Weston figured out all of those years ago. And the Weston, the white tea fragrance, that's the one that they use. When you walk into a Weston, you know it. It's there, right? And so I think
Yeah.
those are some of the key pieces that we can do on the very top level. And again, I think on some subsequent podcasts, we'll go into a little bit more of the nitty gritty, certain kinds of fragrances, how ones go about it, how the technology works. There's some really cool things that we'll delve into deeper, but this is just meant to be a good little top level overview of what we can do.
Yeah. I think when we post this, we'll include some of the links and resources that people can utilize that way if they want to get started, as well as a link to anybody that wants to continue the conversation offline with Brad or myself that will be provided for everyone. Next couple episodes, we do have like a future of work, a return to the office coming up soon. We have an overall overview session similar to this for music, so we can kind of go into that side. And then really digging into how organizations are moving forward. We are in a, and I keep telling people there is no new normal. We're kind of in a new era, and we have to, as business leaders, as organizations that have spent a lot of time in both corporate and this subliminal space, that is bubbling up to the forefront of people's brains. The expectation is much higher, so hopefully this set of information is helpful to everybody. And until next time,
Thank you so
thanks
much.
everyone.
Thanks for listening. Take care.